Welcome back to Geomaths. In today's lesson, we are going to talk about set simplification. Actually, when we say set simplification, what we mean is that we are going to reduce the numbers under the square root to numbers that do not have perfect squares. So when we talk about perfect squares, we basically mean that the square of the natural numbers. So 1 squared is 1, so 1 is a perfect square. 2 squared gives you 4, 4 is a perfect square, 3 squared gives you 9, 9 is a perfect square, on and on and on. So we want to reduce these sets to the form where it is not having a factor which is a perfect square. Like you do not have 9 as a factor, you do not have say 4 as a factor, you do not have 16 as a factor, and so on and so on. How do you go about this? Basically, it means we are supposed to find two factors of 8, which one of them preferably being a perfect square. So I'm going to teach you the method that is usually used. So how do you go about this? You simply have to take example 1. You have been given the square root of 8. It is going to give you, realize that 8 can be written as 4 times 2. Then 4 is a perfect square, meaning that when we take the square root of 4, we get a whole number. And also, according to the properties of set we learned earlier, this can be written as the square root of 4 times the square root of 2. And then the square root of 4 is going to give us 2. And then the square root of 2 is a set. Actually, the square root of all the prime numbers are going to be what? Set. So the square root of 2 is a set. So we also learned that 2 times the square root of 2. And then we know it can also be written as 2 root 2 according to the properties of set we learned earlier. So this is very suitable when the numbers you are dealing with are small. And so let's move on to the second one, which is also very suitable to do when the numbers are small. So the square root of 27, what numbers multiplying themselves gives you 27? The numbers we are going to choose are 9 and 3. And we actually want to choose a number or a factor which is a perfect square and multiply by another number. So we can clearly see that 9 times 3 is going to give you the square root of the 9 times the square root of the 3, which will further give you the square root of 9 gives you 3 times the square root of 3. And the square root of 3 is a set in the lowest form as well, so it becomes 3 root 3. Now we are moving on to bigger numbers, and that is where the technique comes in. How do you get a perfect square which will multiply another number, which is also a factor of 147? It becomes hectic as the numbers are becoming bigger and bigger. So I'm going to teach you a trick with a calculator. So assuming you have this as your calculator, what you have to do is type the result on your calculator, preferably the scientific calculator. So the square root of 147, and then you press your equal to realize that it gives you 7 root 3. It gives you 7 root 3. And then that is the answer you are supposed to get. But mostly these questions don't require you use a calculator to get the final answer. So now that I know that the calculator is giving me 7 root 3, what do? I write the 7 root 3 somewhere not in my solution. In this example, let me just write 7 root 3 here. So that is my answer I'm supposed to arrive at. But this is supposed to help me get the two values that when I multiply, I'll get 147. How do I do that? Let's do it here instead. So for instance, you have 7 root 3 as your final answer. This is supposed to guide you. You have to square the number outside of the square root. So it becomes 7 squared. Then you multiply the result by the number under the square root. So 7 squared gives you 49 times 3. That means that the two numbers which will multiply to give you 147, instead of thinking through for a very long time, you just type it on the calculator. It gives you the final answer you are supposed to solve. So you are solving it reversely. So after getting this, you square the number outside of the square root 7 squared, then you multiply by the number under the square root. So it means that the two numbers are going to be, so this is not done in your solution, it is done somewhere else. So 49 times 3 is supposed to give us 147. Then we separate it, we get 149 times the square root of 3. Now, square root of 49 is 7 times square root of 3. And we are going to get 7 root 3. So the calculator method is really helpful to get the two factors or two numbers which when we multiply, we get the number under the square root. And one of them should be preferably be a perfect square. Let's head on to even a very big number. Like, I skipped for 98. Okay, let's go to 98. Change the numbers. So let's go to 98. Square root of 98. What two numbers are going to give us 98? And one of them is a perfect square. So simply, I'll pick my calculator and I'll type the square root of 98. It gives me 7 root 2. So I do this somewhere else, not on my working sheet. You don't have to show the examiner that you type on the calculator, but it's supposed to guide you. So it means that I squared 7, then I multiply by what is under the square root, which is 2 in this case. So 49 times 2 is supposed to give me 98. So I come back to my working sheet and I do 49 times 2. And then according to the rules of set, we can separate this to square root of 49 times the square root of 2. And the square root of 49 gives us 7 times square root of 2, which is going to give us 7 root 2. Now let's go to the 5, which is the square root of 1692. Imagine the time it will take you to get a perfect square, which is a factor of 1692, which we multiply by another factor of 1692 to give you 1692. It's going to take you time. So as we already know, pick your calculator. So the square root of 1692 gives us 6 root 47. 6 root 47. So I write it somewhere like 6 root 47. Then I square the number outside, 6 squared times 47. We know 6 squared gives us 36 times 47. That means that the two numbers that I'm going to multiply are 36 and 47. So I come to my working space, I write 36 times the square, times, let me cancel it and rewrite it. So I get square root of 36 times 47, which is going to give us the square root of 36 times the square root of the 47. Now, the square root of 36 is giving us 6 times the square root of 47. And according to said, we can just write it as 6 root 47. See how simple it has been by the use of the calculator. Now, we use the calculator, but we didn't use it in solving it. It helped us to get the two numbers that we multiply, in this case 36 and 47. Now, let's go to the sixth one, which is the square root of a very big number like 70,000. How do we get the two factors? You take your calculator. The square root of 70,000 is giving us 100 root 7. So you type 100 root 7. That is what the answer we are supposed to get, or that is the answer we are supposed to get finally, actually. But we can't just come and write it there because we are not supposed to be using the calculator. So we get 100 root 7. So what are the factors? I'll have to square the 100. So it becomes 100 squared times the number under the square root, which is 7. 100 squared is going to give us 10,000 times the number under the square root is 7. So we are going to have the two factors as 10,000 times 7, which is going to give us, what is the square root? You separate it according to the laws of said. If you have two numbers multiplying under the square root, we can take the square root of the first number times the square root of the second number, as we've already been doing. Then square root of 10,000 is going to give you 100 times the square root of 7, which is a said already. in its lowest form as well. So we are going to get 100 root 7. Now let's do the final one. It is question 7. We are having the square root of 500. For this particular one also, for 500, you can even guess it's 100 times 5. But let's just do it on the calculator. So square root of 500 is going to give you 10 root 5. So 10 root 5 is the answer the calculator is giving you. So you are going to do it somewhere else. That 10 root 5, it means that you square the number outside, you get 10 squared, then you multiply by the number under the square root, which is what? 5. So you get 100 times 5. So these are the two numbers which will multiply to give you 500. 100 times 5. Take note that this 500, you could actually get other numbers that could multiply and give you 500, but make sure one of the numbers is a perfect square. And that is why we are using this method to get the two numbers which will fit perfectly. In this case, 100 and then 5. So we are going to get, separating it, you are going to get square root of 100 times square root of 5. It's going to give us, square root of 100 is going to give us 10. And the square root of 5 is already said. So we are going to get 10 root 5. So that is how we simplify sets. Very simple with the calculator. If you are given a big number, make sure you use the calculator to get the final answer. Square the number outside of the square root, multiply by the number under the square root. That will give you the number under the square root you are going to simplify. Then that is it. Thank you.